Hello, Central Kentucky and beyond, and welcome back to another episode of My Kentucky Home. I'm your host, Clay Neff, and this is where we try to talk all things home and introduce you to the wonderful professionals that we have an opportunity to work with day in and day out that can make sure that your house is working for you and you are not always working on your house. So today we have as our guest Kari Cheek with Rosie Home Inspection.
Hi.
Hi, Kari. Thanks for being part of the show today.
Well, thanks for having me.
It's good to see you. And now, I met you a few years ago.
Yes.
And when I met you, this was just kind of something you were just starting out. You weren't even, I don't think, full-time yet.
I think that's right. Yeah, it's been quite a few years, I think, since I met you, Clay. I started back in 2014, so it's been about 7 years when I got my license and got it started. And I worked the first about 3.5 years just evenings and weekends. And then at some point in there, I made it my full-time job. So that's what I'm doing now, 100%.
Okay, great. Well, so how did Kari go from, when I was a kid, I was going to be a professional baseball player to being the mold guy now. So how did you go from what you wanted to do as a kid to being in the home inspection industry?
Yeah, I think a lot of home inspectors, we're not exactly sure how we got to where we are. But I've always really loved buildings, even from when I was a kid. And I grew up a little bit of a tomboy. I have 4 brothers. And when I was about 6 years old, we moved into a 100-year-old house. There was always stuff to do. So my dad was always teaching my brothers and I just little bits and pieces, basic repairs and wiring outlets and switches and things like that. And I always really enjoyed it. And even we've lived in Central Kentucky so long, we'd go out to Shakertown and look at all the buildings there and the architecture. And even when I was really little, there was something so cool about it. I loved going on the tours where the guides would talk about building construction, and everything there is completely handmade. They'd saw down the trees by the river, create a building with not even nails. They'd use like pegs, build the thing, and then they would label every piece, take it up the hill to wherever they wanted the building to be, and put it back together like a puzzle. That fascinated me. So I think my interest in buildings began a long time ago. But jump ahead, I have a bachelor's degree in English from the University of Kentucky, and at that time was thinking I'd become a high school English teacher, and went through a few different things. I spent about 6 years as a health and safety manager for an industrial company, and that's kind of where I thought I was going to settle and where my career would be, but I just would get bored by it. It was a lot of paperwork and pencil pushing, that kind of thing. And when I was about 26, I guess, I was going through the process of buying my first house. And, I hired the home inspector because that's what you're supposed to do. I don't really know, exactly what a home inspector does. But so I hired this guy, and he comes out and he looks at my prospective house. And I remember I followed him all around. I'm sure I was kind of annoying to him. I followed around and asked him lots of questions while he was inspecting this house. And I thought, that looks like a really fun job. Like, that's cool. What do you have to do to be a home inspector? So from there, I kind of studied up on it and figured out, what all you have to know and what certification looks like. And I guess the rest is kind of history.
Awesome. Well, that's great. Yeah, I had no clue about the mold industry before I started. I was in the corporate world, and then somebody introduced me to the industry, and it kind of went from there as well, because I started with the corporate world and travel and all of that. So I took a very roundabout path to get where I'm at. But so you mentioned buying your first house, and you went through a home inspection. And I think that's what most people think of when they think of a home inspection. That's when they're going to get one, which is important. And we'll touch on why that's important. But I was thinking about this as I was kind of preparing for this. And I was like, there's a couple other areas that I see that's just as important for a home inspection. And if I'm missing anything or I'm wrong, correct me, because I am often, according to my wife, I'm often wrong. So, but I think when you're getting ready to sell your house, a home inspection can be a valuable tool.
Yes.
Because we all know negotiations are going to take place, and the more power you can have in that negotiation, the better deal you're going to get.
Absolutely.
But then I think also just if you've got a house that you've lived in for 10 or 15 years, and even if you're not planning on selling, doesn't hurt just to get some fresh eyes on it to kind of see what's going on. So can you kind of talk about each of those and how, and does it change what you do in a home inspection, or is it pretty much the same for each of those scenarios?
That's a really good question. The majority of the home inspections I perform are for home buyers. So they have a contract on a house and they're going through that process of, seeing if they want to proceed with the sale. And sometimes, things that are found during a home inspection, if a home inspector points them out, the buyer can try and negotiate with the seller on getting repairs so they don't have all those expenses when they first move in. So that's what a lot of people, you're right, think of, that's all you need a home inspector for. But it's funny you mentioned like pre-sale inspections. If you're getting ready to put your house on the market, I have a house coming up this week where the person who's hired me, they're going to sell at some point in the near future. So they want to know anything that might be wrong with the house or that might come up on their buyer's inspection later, so there's no surprises. And they're actually also I do radon testing and mold testing as well. Not all the detailed mitigation stuff that you do, obviously, but just do that basic sampling during the home inspection so that I can kind of give people that whole picture of what might be going on with the house. So if you're going to sell it, you have all this good information to go into a sale. And you can some people's strategy is, they want the house to be in better condition or the best possible condition before it goes on the market. Some people even use that knowledge just as a strategy of, any house is going to have issues and problems. And whenever you list your house, you're going to fill out a seller's disclosure and you're going to say everything that is wrong with the house or just information about the house that you're aware of. So some people will use the home inspection, getting it done in advance, as that information to put on their disclosure so that, in effect, any buyer that comes along and looks at the house later, they're saying, up front, here's all the known issues. We're going to negotiate the price based on this. So you can take it or you can leave it, but you know what you're getting into before we go through the process of actually signing a contract and, paying for a home inspection, paying for, your mortgage assessment, all those kinds of things. So there's a couple strategies even going in for selling your house. Some people my cousin actually just contacted me, her and her husband, they're thinking they're going to kind of upgrade and sell their house in the next year. They're finding with this COVID stuff, they're working from home, it's too small. They've got 2 little kids. So I think a lot of people have found that this year.
I think so. Or they want bigger backyards. That's
or
for
bigger
sure.
backyards.
Yeah.
So it's like they know it's not something where they need a new house immediately. They've got a nice place that they're living in, a house they own. But their thought is, if they're going to put it on the market in a year or so, if they get an inspection done now and can kind of piddle around on the weekends and know what to work towards, little repairs to make that a home inspector sees when they look at the house, they're probably increasing the value of their house for when they are ready to sell, and they're doing their due diligence and home maintenance too. That's kind of more focused than just what the average homeowner might know to do with their house. So I think that's another really good reason to even have maintenance inspections, even if you're not selling your house, but just what a professional sees is different from what you see. When you look at your house, you may see that, the shutters have some chipping paint. In all honesty, the shutters don't usually have a function even to the house. They're pretty, they make it look cute, but most shutters aren't even functional. They're decorative. So what you really want to focus on is, the way the drainage is coming through your gutters, and make sure that you have downspout extensions at the corners of your house so you don't have potential water damage coming that then leads to, hiring you and having to deal with mold issues later. Or even, I know, Clay, we get into the same disgusting crawl spaces, and usually homeowners don't have any idea what's going on down below their house if they are built on a crawl space construction. So hiring a home inspector, even if you're not selling your house, but just to get through that crawl space and check it out. A couple weeks ago, I was through a crawl space and the house was only about 19 years old. It had 2 serious plumbing leaks that had been leaking onto structural members for months at least, and had eroded some of the wood of that structure. And it's an easy fix, putting a drain pipe back together under your sink, easy to do. You don't even need a professional to do it in most cases, just a little bit of a working knowledge of plumbing. But if you can't see it, a lot of times it's just never dealt with. So attic issues come up like that too, where homeowners don't get into attics. So there are a lot of reasons to hire a home inspector outside of just buying a house.
Sure, absolutely. And it all sounds logical, right? That's everything we just talked about sounds logical.
Yep.
But we know when the home buying process starts,
Yes.
the logic goes out the window and emotions come into play. So people that are looking to buy a house, they found their dream house and they've fallen in love with it, and now they're all emotional. The person that's selling the house feels like they've done a good job taking care of the house all these years.
It's their baby. Yep.
Right. So you do your inspection, you present the report, and it's kind of like, I'll use a baseball analogy. I either played or coached baseball most of my life. So someone says, hey, can you take a look at my swing for me? And I'm like, that's working, that's not. You might want to fix that. It'll be more functional. I'm not saying whether you have a good swing or a bad swing.
Exactly.
I'm just giving you some information.
Exactly.
But because these emotions come into play, now the seller feels like you're saying I'm not a good homeowner, and the buyers, you're crushing my dream home. So how do you set that expectation and navigate those emotions in your role?
That's a really good question, and that is a fine line that we walk in this industry. I think one of the important things I feel like that's kind of a home inspector's duty is, whenever I finish up an inspection, and again, normally I am working for a home buyer because normally that's when people are paying for the inspection. So, when I talk to the buyer about what my findings were, I'm going to report that maybe there's a leak under a sink, there's an outlet that's been miswired, there's something going on with a plumbing vent on top of a roof that's letting a little water down into the house, and maybe there's a little damage spot of the drywall below, something like that. So
which can lead to mold.
Which will lead to mold. So there's all these things where honestly, even I inspect new construction. The builder has just left. It's this is ready for occupancy supposedly. I go in and I still find things. So I'd like to tell people that of even, if you're buying a house that's 40 years old, it's going to have its own set of problems. Even if you're buying a house that's 0 years old, there are things I find over and over and over again. So one of the things as a home inspector I feel like is important is to put a house into context. And what I mean by that is I inspect houses, again, that are 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and on years old. So if you look at even within a 10-year range or a decade, what I find is if I go into a house that was built in the 1940s and I give you this list of things I found that are deficiencies, if you terminate that contract and you go shopping for a house that's also built in 1940, a lot of people have like a preference, on the style of house, and that makes it a certain age range. If they keep shopping for a house that was built in 1940, you're more than likely going to keep seeing the same list or similar things over and over and over. So that's really an important thing to remember when you're looking at buying a house and whether you want to proceed or what you want to have repaired by the seller before you agree to buy it, is that if you keep looking for a house in a certain age range, if the house is average, most likely we're going to find that again on a similar house. So some houses I'll say are above average and they've been, taken care of better than average and have had less problems through the 80 years they've existed. And some houses maybe have more problems, and there really are severe issues that have happened from, the house not being properly taken care of, or poor building materials when it was built, or, it hasn't had the electrical updates and safeties built into it that we would like to see when it's this far along. But that context is super important for deciding, whether you stick with that house and maybe try and negotiate repairs, or whether you move on to something else. And some people do jump into a different age range of house because they decide, well, I don't really know enough about houses to live and take care of an older house, and maybe they realize that during the home inspection process.
Yeah, they are hard to maintain.
They really are, and can be more expensive
so much
too.
Over the years.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, well, that's great information for everyone to have. So, let me ask you this, because I know that I spend a lot of time in houses by myself.
Yes.
And you do too. So, just this week, I go into this house. I'm in the basement checking out the cinder blocks, foundation wall. There's some old issues going on. And I hear footsteps. And I'm like, okay, maybe the realtor or the buyer is coming to meet me. They want to hear what I have to say. I go upstairs, no one. I go to the top floor.
Oh my gosh.
No one.
Haunted.
No one. I look out. This was Monday, so we had snow. Mm-hmm. I look outside. The only footsteps are mine. The only tire tracks in the driveway are mine. Needless to say, I wrapped that up pretty quick and got out of there. I mean, I was literally
that's
creeped out a little
eerie.
bit. So what is the weirdest, strangest thing that has happened to you?
Oh my gosh. Well, I don't have a good that's a haunted house. You do just need to cut your losses on that one, Clay. One of the weirder things that's happened to me was probably in the first 2 years that I was inspecting. I was hired to inspect a farm property out in Sadieville, out by Georgetown. And that house, I mean, it was a regular farmhouse. I was doing my inspection. At that time, I would get into the crawl space at the very end of the inspection because I'd had a chance to run all the plumbing during my regular course of work inside. And one great thing to check when you get under the house is for plumbing leaks. So I left it for last. And I'll never forget, I took off the panel on the outside of the house and I crawled in. And old farmhouses, any old house, if it has a crawl space, it's little. You know that. Yeah. Farmhouses even, I think that the structures are even more pieced together than if it was a house that was, in a city maybe, because it's kind of like, we're going to prop this structure up on whatever we can find that's close by. So a lot of times that ends up being literally timbers. So the house is like, it's just sitting on logs when you get down there. It's narrow, it's dark, it's like, you can't even get through the whole thing. The decision to be made is like, how far do I crawl before I get so stuck that I feel like I might not be able to get out?
Totally been there.
And then that's when you turn around, which involves like worming. And it's not crawling, it's worming. So it was one of those, and I get under this house. I got like pretty far down into one corner and was going to try to worm my way back to face the entrance again. And I hear like a and I kind of, you can't quite see it. I worm around. There's a goat, like with sticking its head.
Oh, did you say goat?
It was a goat, horns and everything, sticking its head into the entrance of the crawl space, bleeding at me. And I've got my little flashlight. I always keep pepper spray with me in a house, but not in a crawl space, because it kind of digs into you. Any pocket you put it into, it's painful. So I just had a flashlight, and this goat starts coming in, walking into the crawl space, or he's kind of crawling too, and I didn't know what to do and start like screaming at this goat, like get,
Oh my goodness.
I haven't even been around goats, so I'm just treating it like I would a dog, go home, get out of here. Well, it does the opposite. It walks fully into the crawl space, and then its friend, another goat, comes in after it. There's just goats in the crawl space. That was probably the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me on an inspection. I tried to strobe light these things to scare them. Nothing worked. I eventually the only thing I could think to do was kind of like charge at them as fast as you can, army crawl, which is not very fast. And they did luckily scoot out because I don't know what
Oh my goodness, that is
done.
hilarious.
So, you just never know. Kind of a creepier one in a crawl space. I had one where this was the opposite of that kind of crawl space. It's one where you could kind of just stand a little with a little hunch. And I went in that one and I was looking at a water heater, and the homeowner, like unannounced, like walked into the crawl space and said something when he was right next to me. I'm kind of turned around. So it was like, are you sneaking up on a person in our crawl space, So I guess there's something to be said for the tight ones, because no one wants to follow you in, except goats, of course.
That's funny. What an appropriate story on Super Bowl weekend.
Yes.
Yeah, I told last or episode we did with Ryan Hilliard, I told my story about a pig. I once did an inspection where a pig just popped up and wanted to cuddle. So it was a really interesting
They're
story.
They're friendly. They're like dogs.
Yeah, that's the way they treated it. So it was pretty interesting.
That's funny.
Well, Kari, I know you're busy, and it's been great having you here. But why don't you take a minute just to tell our audience how they can get a hold of you if they need to use you for a home inspection?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my company is Rosie Home Inspections. I got my little logo here, so you know when you find it online. But just rosiehomeinspections.com will get you to my website, or you can find us on Facebook. And we do full home inspections, and like I said, quick turnaround radon testing. They're 2 days. And then we do mold sampling, which I recommend using us if you're getting a home inspection through us, but I recommend Clay if you are targeting specific mold issues that you already know about. And then sewer scope is something that we are going to be adding to our list of services in the next couple of months. My husband actually works with me now too, and we're doing training on that and just ordered our first camera. So stay tuned for that, but we'll be able to kind of scope those sewer drains and be able to see, if there's any damage or issues that are going on underground that we can't actually see. But yeah, rosiehomeinspections.com, and you can even book appointments with us online if you're a person who doesn't like to talk on the phone. So we've got something for everybody.
Good deal. Awesome. Well, thanks again for being here and being
Yeah.
part of the show, and we will see you guys next episode.